I was on Reddit the other week and I found a pretty funny post that actually inspired me to make this video. I'll actually put a link to that in the description below. The title of the post was, "Would you speak to a criminal who's about to attack you in honorific or casual Korean?" Now, politeness levels are a major aspect of Korea, so how do you speak to someone else? And what I actually think are the most difficult things to master in all of Korean. So trying to cover all of politeness levels in one single video or even just a few videos would be pretty much impossible. So instead, for this video, what I want to do is just give a overview, a full summary kind of the politeness levels. Specifically, I wanted to summarize how the politeness levels feel. So what they actually feel like when you hear them and when you use them. Now, for this video, there is a prerequisite. You do need to first know about politeness levels basically to know what different terms I'm going to be using are. For example, formal speech or the yo form or casual speech. You'll need to know these sorts of things in advance in order to understand this summary I'm going to give you about how each of those feels. Now, I should also take this opportunity to announce that I have a brand new series called Master Politeness Levels, and it is going up on my channel. Actually, if you're watching this video today, it should be up in about a week or so. And if you're watching this video in the future, it's probably already on my channel. So make sure to check that out. It is 24 episodes. It is completely free, and it will go through pretty much everything there is about Korean politeness levels. So every single type of form and thing that you need to know in order to speak more like a native. But I will also say this, even if you don't watch that whole series, even if you don't master politeness levels necessarily, as long as you understand how the different politeness levels, how different styles of speech feel, then even if you don't know the intricacies of it, you're still going to have a much better time using Korean, and you're going to sound still a lot more like a native. So in this video, I'm going to specifically talk about a few of the most common speech styles, and we're going to be starting with formal speech. This one you might be more familiar with as the endings 니다 or 니까, for example. So like you might have 하다 becomes 합니다 or 먹다 becomes 먹습니다. This one is used for making official announcements or speeches or for writing formal letters or for when you're meeting your new boss or a new teacher or your new parents-in-law or in the Korean army. So those are just some common situations that this gets used. But if you just learn that, you just learn where you should use it, then I feel like most people actually tend to avoid this form completely because they feel, well, I'm not giving a speech, so I don't need it. But that's actually a common misconception, and this form is still commonly used in regular speech as well. The reason is, this speech style actually conveys a strong, respectful feel. And it conveys that. It shows that strong, respectful feel. It shows that toward the listener. So this is specifically for who you are speaking with. So there are more situations that you might want to convey that sort of strong and respectful feel than just the few situations that I listed there. And that will make more sense once I show the next level. So you're probably familiar with this one. This is the most commonly used form of speech, and it's anything that ends in 요 typically, including things like 아니요 when you're saying no. Now, this form usually sounds polite. However, it doesn't always sound polite. But I will say on its own, this form is not disrespectful sounding. So then if formal speech has a strong, respectful feel to it, then how does the yo form feel? Well, the yo form sounds soft and polite. So strong, respectful, soft, polite. So then which style of speech would you want to use when you're meeting your new parents-in-law? Would you want to have a strong, respectful feel to your speech, or would you want to have more of a soft, polite feel to your speech? And that's really up to you. And it depends on how you feel, how close you feel with those people. And usually when you're meeting someone for the first time, it's better to err on the side of being more polite instead of risk sounding a little bit too casual. So it's up to you, but just keep in mind, strong, respectful versus soft and polite. And now this form can even be made more polite when it's combined with other forms. For example, one of those would be honorific speech, which I'll talk about in a second. If you combine this yo form with honorific speech, then it's even more polite. And there are even other forms within the yo form that you can add to make it sound more polite as well. For example, the 나요 or 가요 endings These ones add an extra soft feel to your sentence when you're asking questions, and using these in combination with the regular yo form, so when you're asking someone a question, you can add this plus honorific speech and you can sound really nice and soft and polite. So I wanted to say that to clarify that just the yo form on its own can be more or less polite depending on how it's being used. And again, all of this stuff and more is in that new course that I mentioned. And the next form is casual speech. Casual speech will be anything that ends in like or o, for example, or like he, 뭐 해, like that. And it's anytime you're just not adding the yo to the end of your conjugation. For example, you might say 했어요 for yo form, and you would just say 했어 for casual speech. And this also includes other casual speech grammar and casual speech endings. For example, you might say 아니야 instead of 아니에요 to say something is not something. So then, is casual speech rude? No. Casual speech simply does not show any sort of extra respect toward the listener. Again, all these three are about how much respect you're showing toward the person who you're currently speaking with, irregardless of the situation or who you're talking about. So this one just doesn't show any sort of extra respect toward them. Now, it's not rude, however. It simply just doesn't show any sort of extra respect. And when it's used correctly, what this form feels like is, it feels friendly. So let's do a quick overview again. Strong, respectful feel, soft, polite feel, and friendly. Again, friendly when it's used correctly. If you were to use casual speech when you're meeting your new parents-in-law, well, it wouldn't really sound friendly. It would sound like you're being disrespectful because you're not showing any extra respect toward them. And it's important to keep these three in your head separately because the next two forms we're going to talk about aren't about who you're speaking to, but are about who you're speaking about. Next, the two we're going to talk about are honorific speech and humble speech. So starting with honorific speech, this will be anytime you see this 으시다 ending on a verb. So this will include anytime you see something like 세요, like 하세요, or anything like that. And it also includes things like honorific particles and honorific nouns, but that's for a different lesson. So this one shows extra respect towards someone. Now, it's not necessarily the person who you're talking to. Honorific speech actually shows extra respect toward the person who you're talking about. Now, that could also be the person who you're currently talking with, but it's whoever you're talking about. So if you're asking a question to the person you're speaking with, well, that's technically talking about them. It's a question about that person, so you could use this. But even if you're talking with your closest friends about someone who you want to show respect toward, you could still use honorific speech while not speaking extra politely toward your friend. And the way it does this, and I think what might help, is if you picture in your mind that you're kind of like putting someone up on a pedestal when you're talking about them. In your mind, you kind of place them at a spot, above you. And that's kind of the feeling that this form gives, is that you're talking about someone as being someone who you look up to, someone who's deserving of extra respect. So again, for honorific speech, imagine that you're looking up to someone, so you're elevating them. And another way to look at this is that it's going to be about the subject of a verb. So if you were to say the sentence, she is nice, well, she is the subject of that sentence and she is nice. So that person, she, is someone who you're looking up to, someone who you're respecting. And again, honorific speech and humble speech can both be mixed with either formal speech or the yo form or casual speech, depending on who you're talking with, to show extra respect towards someone who you're talking about. So that's why I said to keep these separate in your mind, because these are not simply just additional politeness levels, these get mixed along with the other politeness levels that we talked about. Next, we have humble speech. Now, there is a bit more to this, but typically it's just the verbs 드리다, which is the humble version of 주다, to give, as well as the verb 보다, which is the humble version of 보다, to see or to look. And this also shows extra respect toward someone who you're talking about. Again, not necessarily who you're talking to, but who you're talking about. And it does that in a slightly different way. Instead of thinking that you're raising someone else above you, that you're looking up to them, instead, this is you humbling yourself down. So you're kind of like you're bowing down or you're kneeling down to someone to bring yourself down, therefore bringing them up. So this one, honorific speech, is like you're raising someone up And this one, humble speech, is like you're lowering yourself down. Both of them accomplish the same purpose. Either way, you're still looking up to someone. It just depends whether you yourself are lowered or not. So you might get those both used together sometimes. This one is also used a little bit differently than honorific speech. This will be specifically when talking about the object. I mean the English grammar term, object. So if you're saying, I gave my teacher a present, well, the teacher is the object and you would be the subject. So I gave the teacher a present. So the teacher is the object, in which case, do I want to show extra respect toward the teacher, show that he or she is someone who I look up to? Well then, if yes, you would use humble speech when you say give to the teacher, or maybe see the teacher, because the teacher is the object of the sentence. And again, both of these are commonly used together with the speech levels we talked about: formal speech, Yule form, and casual speech. And the last one I want to talk about is the plain form. And this will be any of the forms that end with ta on their own, like this. So you get 하다 would become 한다, 먹다 to eat would become 먹는다, and 춥다 to be cold would just be 춥다. So that's the plain form. And this one is a bit different. It's used in writing, and it's used when it's not directed at anyone in particular. So you're just saying it or you're writing it without any audience in mind. Now, in speech, it is also used, but it has a slightly different purpose. Again, it's still for no intended specific audience, but in speech, it can also be used like you're talking to yourself. You're just kind of saying it, like you're just announcing something without necessarily announcing it at anyone in particular. Or you can just use it out loud with your friends when you want someone else's attention. Like you're just saying something, you're not directing it at anyone, you're just announcing someone like, hey, listen to me, I'm gonna say this. So because of that, you'll see this form used most often just in writing, as well as in many grammar forms, like in quoting forms. So again, if you're using this out loud, it's really just like you're making an announcement. And it's used this way in casual speech. So like announcing something casually to your friend, but it doesn't, unlike casual speech, it doesn't have that friendly feel to it. It's just more of a plain feeling. And plain form, just like any of the other ones, formal, Yule form, or casual, can also be used together with humble speech or honorific speech. And that is for the same reasons as we already talked about. In summary, formal speech has a strong, respectful feel. The Yule form has a soft, polite feel. And casual speech, when it's used correctly, has a friendly feel, but it doesn't show any extra respect. Plain form, however, is plain. It's not directed at anyone in particular, although in casual speech it can be used kind of like to get other people's attention, but it's most often used in writing when it doesn't have any intended audience. For example, like writing a journal or a newspaper article or something like that. Honorific speech, however, is for showing extra respect towards someone who you're talking about. This will be the subject of a verb, and it does that by raising them up, by putting them up on a pedestal and showing extra respect toward them, saying, this is someone who I look up to, or this is someone who I should respect. And humble speech, on the other hand, also shows extra respect towards someone you're talking about. This would be the object of a verb. So the object, someone that's receiving some sort of action, and that will be someone who you're giving something to, or someone who you're looking at or seeing with those two verbs that I showed. And humble speech shows that by lowering yourself down, thereby putting them up for someone who you should show extra respect towards, someone who you look up to. So then going back to the post, would you speak to a criminal who's about to attack you in honorific or casual speech? Let's think about this. If you were to use casual speech, it would sound rude and you might be in trouble. On the other hand, if you were to use only polite speech, an honorific speech, that would be very polite, and you might be safe. So in this one, I might recommend using the Yule form along with honorifics. You want a soft, polite form. You don't want to sound too strong and respectful, but you still want to add extra politeness by showing, I respect you, and use honorifics in there. So yeah, just to at least avoid making them mad. What would you do? And what else would you like to learn about politeness levels? I could maybe make a sequel to this video with more information. Also, make sure to check out my brand new series, Master Politeness Levels. This will be premiering about a week or so from today. Thank you for watching. If you have any other questions, do also leave those in the comments. I read all of those, and I will see you again in the next video. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.